Good evening and welcome to tonight's video. Tonight we are talking about how to cut down a Shakespeare play. Let's go. G'day, Paul from Small Crown Productions, and welcome back to the channel. Or if you're here for the first time, welcome. We are participating in a 100 Days of Shakespeare event, and that's what one of these videos is about. If you're not sure what that is, I will link that up for you in a video here after this live stream so that you can check that out. It will take you back to the first video I did in this series that will explain what the 100 Days of Shakespeare is about. Tonight, I want to do a real quick rundown on just... a real quick rundown on my thought process when I need to cut down a Shakespeare play. They are large plays. They are often very large plays. They can be cumbersome to work with. And sometimes you just need a shorter version of the production. And there has been some wonderful, wonderful versions that I have both seen and performed in that are cut down from the original text. The Queensland Shakespeare Ensemble, who I worked with for many years, have a version of Hamlet and Romeo and Juliet and Macbeth and the Midsummer Mechanicals that are all condensed versions of the plays. The Hamlet gets done in 27 minutes, and then they actually have two smaller cut down encores that they do. So I think it happens in like 27 minutes, 7 minutes, and 3 minutes or something like that. But they are super, super condensed. And it really is amazing what you can do when you just start to focus on the things that you need. And there are other books that you can get. So here's a couple of books that I got of 20-minute and 15-minute Shakespeare's. I've had these for a while. And something on my tongue, excuse me. The 20-minute Shakespeare contains a cut-down version of Twelfth Night, Midsummer Night's Dream, Much Ado About Nothing. And the 15-minute Shakespeare has a version of Hamlet, Antony and Cleopatra. Romeo and Juliet, Macbeth, and Antony and Cleopatra. So, you can really cut these down into whatever length you need them, but you need to have a bit of an approach, a bit of a structure on how you're going to do that. That's going to give you a bit of a guide. And that's what I'm hoping to share with you tonight, just my way of doing that, the way I think about it, the way I approach it. So the first thing that you need to do, the first thing you want to look for, obviously you've got to choose your play, but once you've done that, you really need to look at which is the main thread that you're going to follow. Now, obviously with something like Romeo and Juliet, you're generally going to pick the journey of Romeo and Juliet. That's pretty clear. But that's not to say that you couldn't take this play and choose some of the other sideline characters, actually tell the story from their perspective. So you might choose that as the main thread of your story and look at the play from a different version. But let's stick with the classic kind of standard of taking the main character through line. So Romeo and Juliet, in Midsummer Night's Dream, it might be the four lovers who are the main thread of your characters. The Mechanicals, that play's particularly interesting because you can actually pull out the Mechanicals play and the mechanical scenes and actually run that as purely as an adapted performance of its own. It's almost like a little self-contained play within the play. So, if you're doing Hamlet, obviously it's going to be the journey of Hamlet. And what you really need to get defined for yourself is what is the absolute main points of that story for that main character. In case of Romeo and Juliet, it might be that they meet and fall in love, they get married in secret and are separated, and then when they come back together at the end, they die. That's it. That's the basic story. So knowing that, what are the scenes that help tell that part of the story that get us through those sections? And how little of those scenes can you use? Because sometimes I think it's great to start with a very clear, focused idea of what it is you're trying to tell, and then actually build it back out from there, rather than take all of this play, which is 5 acts and so many scenes, and then try and decide ad hoc what you're going to keep and what you're going to throw. I think if you start with really clarifying for yourself what is the main story that we are telling in this version that's going to end up being our cut down version, that is going to give you a much easier run in actually building the story out. So you want to cut it right back to the basic storyline of the main character or characters, and then build it out from there. And so once you've done that, you're going to define that in the simplest terms that you can. What is the main thread of this character? So for Hamlet, he's told that his father was murdered. He tries to seek revenge. Everybody dies. It is super simplistic, but that is essentially the crux of the story. Now, when you think about that, how many scenes do we see in Hamlet where Hamlet is taking some kind of action to try and get himself to the point of taking revenge, but doesn't quite get there? There's a lot of them. So how many of those do you actually need to leapfrog the story forward in order to get to the next part of the story? So what we're seeing in a normal play is these micro steps, these steps that take us on a very clear, distinct journey. And by choosing carefully which ones to remove, our character is just going to take bigger steps, but still get to that same point. So you need to work out what are the main story points that we have to hit, and then look at everything that happens between those story points, and you can decide what you keep and what you don't keep from there. So that for me is the first place to start. What's the main, whose story are we telling? What are the main points in this story that we need to get across to really make the story be clear? Where are those moments in the play? How much of those scenes do we need to keep to give us an understanding that this is how a character is feeling and this is what they're doing? And that is our starting point. That's the basis. Then we need to look at the characters that are surrounding our main character that are impacting the character to either run to something or run from something. So, who are the characters that are helping support our hero through their moments of doubt and to take action? Or what are the main obstacles to them actually getting to that result that they want? And then look at those and decide which of those are needing to be told, because there is a lot of them that you'll be able to get away with not having. Don't worry about the characters that are speaking so much right now. Think about what are those moments that help define this story. Start with the moments and the story structured, well, the moments. I mean, that's really kind of what it is. So start with the moments. Then you can look at who the characters are that have those moments with our hero or influence that with our hero, and decide, are they going to be your main, you've got the antagonist, the main antagonist of the play, the main villain, if you will, or the main obstacle. Is that going to be really the person that delivers all of this? So you need to then look at those moments and decide, how many of those do we actually need to drive the story forward? And I know this is sounding like really simplistic, and it's not as easy to do this when you sit down to pull a play apart. But if you can find these moments, then it just makes the process easier. So define who your lead hero is. Who's the hero? Whose story are we telling? What are the main story points that we need to hit for our audience to understand what journey they're going on? What are those scenes, and where are they in the play? Then, what are the things that we need to know to give them context? So for Romeo and Juliet, if we're going to set this up really clearly, we need to know that these two families are at odds. They are at war. Two households, both alike in dignity. In Fair Verona, where we lay our scene, we need to know that these families have been essentially at war for some time. So how much do we need to know from everything else around it? How much do we need to see that tells us that? Maybe it's, do you bite your thumb at me, sir? Maybe it's simply those few moments in that scene where they come together and fight. And we learn very quickly that these two families are at odds. There's definitely two distinct people in this, two sides to this. And that's what sets that scene for us, because it makes the love story even stronger when we know that they're from families that are at loggerheads. Otherwise, it's just a couple of people that met in a bar, and it's not really that interesting. So that's something very key to helping drive the emotion of this story. So we need that to come out, whether it's through the prince's opening monologue, whether it's through the fight in the street where they do you bite your thumb at me, sir? Those sorts of things. Whether it's a conversation with Romeo and Mercutio on the way to the party, whichever one of those gives us the strongest understanding of what is happening and where our characters are, that's the one that you want to start with. So find those moments that help define our understanding of this journey that our character is going on. Look for those, work out how many there are. There will be more than one, usually, and pick the most important one and start to look at those scenes. And then once you know those moments and you've got clarity on those, then you want to start looking at all the characters that are around. How many of these characters do we need to both support and push against our main character? Can you mold multiple characters into one character? You pick one of the characters who might deliver the lines for 3 or 4 characters, because really what you need to do is get a thought across, get some moments across. And in this version, we can do that with a singular character as opposed to 3, 4, or 5 characters, because we're condensing it down as much as we are. So once you've got that, then you've got the framework. And it's really that, I mean, that simple, but that's it. That's really building the framework out. Take those scenes, work those scenes. I would absolutely recommend that when you get it to a point where you think you've got a flow, test it with some actors. Get people to read it. Not you. Make sure you're not reading it. Make sure that you, as the person ripping this play apart and putting it back together, are listening. Does it flow? Does it make sense? Have somebody else there to listen who hasn't been involved in the process that you've had to give you an outside perspective, because your head will be so in it that you might think that it's very clear, but somebody who hasn't actually been involved in that process, it might make zero sense to them. So you want that outside perspective. Your actors that read it for you will also give you that feedback. So you want to make sure that you get that tested. Then that will give you feedback that you can go away and refine. If you may need a few more moments, you may need to clarify some moments, and you can refine that again, test it again, get some more feedback until you've really worked out a clear storyline for your hero that gets the story across in the way that you want. That's it. It sounds crazy, but it can be that simple. So a bit of a structure for you to approach, because, sometimes we want to do Shakespeare and you don't have 24 people and you don't have 12 people sometimes. You might only have 4. So how could 4 of you do a Shakespeare play? The versions that we did with the Queensland Shakespeare Ensemble are actually amazing versions of those plays cut down, and they were all basically 4-handers with multiple characters being played by each actor, and very quick changes out the back. And sometimes, it was only 1 or 2 lines from a particular character that gave you the understanding of what was happening. And then they moved on, and that person, went backstage, changed, and became out as another character for the next scene. So they do move much faster. Those particular plays that the Queensland Shakespeare Ensemble do actually become quite farcical, and they're really, really well done. So be aware of that. You may change the tone of the play as well, that it may not be as dramatic, but you can still get a dramatic storyline through, but have more moments of comedy. So be conscious of that, and don't be afraid to embrace that if that is what happens. So there you go. Very quick rundown on how I think about actually cutting a play down so that it can be a much shorter version. And I hope that was of use to you. It would be great if you got something out of this. Give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and of course, if you think you might know someone that could get something out of it, share it with them. That'd be great. And I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.